This Sunday on Capital Connection, Governor Pritzker extends his order to stay at home to slow the spread of the coronavirus in Illinois, all as some Republicans accuse him of an unconstitutional power grab.
I do not believe that we as Americans can and do live like this.
Plus, Senate Republicans criticize the governor's release of 7 convicted murderers from Illinois prisons as the governor's office seeks to clear space in prisons where outbreaks have become common.
Why on earth are you going to open up the doors of prisons for someone who beat to death a 5-month-old child?
And as golf courses and state parks start to reopen soon for outdoor activities, could the state fair still be on the calendar? The Department of Agriculture director tells us why that's not out of the question. It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell reporting from the Illinois State House on this Sunday, April 26. For the first time in more than a month, doctors can perform elective surgeries, golfers can book tee times, and travelers can visit state parks starting on May 1st. Those activities were all banned under Governor Pritzker's first 2 executive orders designed to slow the spread of the coronavirus. State House Republicans rejoiced at the relaxed rules, Senator Chapin Rose calling them long overdue. Republican leaders in the House and Senate said they were pleased at Governor Pritzker's direction, but felt he didn't go quite far enough. House Republican Darren Bailey challenged the limits of Governor Pritzker's executive authority in court, arguing his voters are ready to go back to work and resume a normal life. Governor Pritzker pointed to mathematical models to argue that could carry deadly consequences.
If we lifted the stay-at-home order tomorrow, we would see our deaths per day shoot into the thousands by the end of May, and that would last well into the summer. No amount of political pressure would ever make me allow such a scenario.
The federal government advised states not to open back up for business until they can detect a 2-week decline in new cases of COVID-19. And when Georgia's Republican governor pushed the envelope in the race to reopen, President Trump voiced his displeasure.
And I don't want this thing to flare up because you're deciding to do something that is not in the guidelines.
I think that a lawsuit about whether or not this is an emergency is a political maneuver at a time when we probably shouldn't be dealing with politics, but rather simply addressing the emergency that no matter what political party you belong to, that you are subject to.
And joining us now is House Republican Darren Bailey from his home office in Louisville, Illinois. Representative, you are filing a lawsuit in the Clay Circuit County Court challenging Governor Pritzker's executive order, saying it should have ended on April 9. That's exactly the time, that's right in the middle of the week when President Trump said America could very well be going through a very, very deadly week, perhaps World War I or World War II. You would have been comfortable pulling off the restrictions on April 9th?
Well, what I would have been comfortable with, and what this lawsuit, seeks, is the fact that the General Assembly needs to be making those kinds of decisions, because you probably, you didn't hear a lot from me at that point in time because we were settling in and learning from this, and it was only until he issued the additional order this past week, to extend it through the end of May. That's whenever I had been contemplating this. The idea had brought up. I've never seen anyone in my life, didn't really want to, but when and I've had conversations with the governor. I've had conversations with the lieutenant governor, and tried, as I have been since day one that I've been serving in the last year, the difference of rural Illinois, southern Illinois, from the rest of the state. So my challenge is specifically going back to the Emergency Management Act that was put in place in the late 70s, and while that was done, it was
87. Yeah.
Thank you.
In the Reagan administration.
Okay, thank you. It was, its purpose, I believe, was to limit the governor's emergency order powers to 30 days. And I just feel like that should have been honored, and it wasn't.
The law does say, and I assume you've read the law.
I have it here in front of me, yes.
So the law gives the governor pretty broad powers, in fact. I was reading through it just last night. The governor has the power under the Illinois Emergency Management Act to seize private property, essentially eminent domain at the state level. I don't think we've seen that before. He has the power to ration supplies, be it food, oil. He has the power, the legal power under the Emergency Management Act to set price controls. He hasn't done any of those things. But at the beginning of the law, it says any disaster proclamation does have a limit of 30 days. But there's nothing in that law that says the governor cannot turn around and declare another disaster proclamation right after. You don't think the disaster is over, do you?
No, well, that's the challenge. So that is the challenge, that it was limited to a 30-day period. So, and that, it's too bad that the General Assembly, due diligence of representing the people and how government is designed to work with three branches here in the United States and here in Illinois, is not following through with that in Illinois. That's what I'm concerned about.
But I wonder, so you're asking a judge to weigh in, that you're going to the judicial branch. The legislature has been sidelined effectively because of the pandemic, because people cannot be in the same building at the same time. The legislature has been effectively sidelined. You're asking and recruiting, tapping the judicial branch to step in and weigh in here. The problem is, I think you're asking a judge to write law that isn't yet written. You're asking a judge to say the governor cannot declare another 30-day period right after, when the law right now doesn't say that. It doesn't prohibit him from doing that.
Well, I'm asking the judge to interpret law, and then hopefully the General Assembly will step in and do their job and take care of this interpretation and rewrite it, maybe make it more understandable.
You said that you have suffered irreparable harm from the governor's decisions. You operate a family farm. You're listed as an essential business. You're allowed to keep going to work. What is the irreparable harm that you describe?
Well, as a free American citizen, obviously on behalf of this is interpreted on my behalf, that it should and would extend to many others who I hear from on a daily basis, who either haven't been able to file for unemployment, when you get families calling into your office and it's been 4 weeks and they've been without any paycheck whatsoever, and there's absolutely nothing right now for the hairdresser that owns her own business. Yeah, that's what I am representing, even of myself. So yes, that's how it's worded. Because of that, if you want to boil it down to the freedoms that I believe that we as Americans are smart enough to conduct ourselves in a manner that this is being infringed upon.
If the governor were to take your advice and to take the controls off, as far back as April 9th, we can presume it would have been worse. He said if he did that on April 21st, if the governor, according to all the scientists and the mathematical models, if they took off the controls, that deaths would skyrocket from 150 or 200 per day at its worst peak so far in Illinois, up to thousands per day, by a factor of 5, a 5-fold increase in the number of deaths. Would that not also be irreparable harm to those families who would have to bury their loved ones?
Well, and that's what I'm challenging as well, because I think as of now, the models, the science, it's been off. I mean, how many times has he changed his model and changed the science? It's been off. It's not right. So, and we've learned from that. So that's
the models are built by, in part, the director of NASA's Astrobiology Institute for Universal Biology. You disagree with him?
Because he said our hospitals were going to be full. He said from the very beginning that he suggested what was going to happen. It didn't happen. Down here in my district, the curve was flattened, in the middle of April, and even before that, we haven't. We've had a recent spike in a isolated nursing home, but other than that, there's nothing going on, and that's why, if nothing else, I'd reached out to at least regionalize this, and that could have been done under legislative action or under his consideration, which he failed to do.
Mm-hmm. I think you're driving at the point that Cook County has the highest number of cases per capita. That's been a hot spot, even nationally reported. Would you care to guess which of Illinois' 102 counties or 101 remaining counties is second place as the most number of confirmed cases of the coronavirus per capita?
Well, I've been told for cases that it might be Jasper County with maybe, what is it now? Is it
36 confirmed cases at last report in Jasper County in your district. It's a small rural county, but when you're measuring these pandemics, you have to look at how much of the population is it saturating, how many people is it infecting per capita, and out of 102 counties, Jasper County in your district is the second, and per capita, it is the deadliest county in Illinois.
So that's isolated in a nursing home that was brought in by an EMT worker. unfortunately. So, you step back and you look at everything that this entails, and, it wasn't going to change anything anyways.
It sounds like you're almost making the case for surrender. Just let it do its thing.
Yeah, I do not believe that we as Americans can and do live like this. So, we've learned a lot. People want to wear masks. If you, it's the same as we live each and every year. If you're elderly, if you have low immune symptoms, if you don't want to get sick, maybe you don't go to church, maybe you don't go to the mall because there's flu-like symptoms out there.
It just seems that the invisible nature of this is what's difficult. If it were any other scenario, a wildfire, if firefighters were pulling, if there were 1,000 people dying and they were pulling 800 of those people from the jaws of death and saving them, we'd throw parades and hail them a hero. But in a virus, and when we all team in to do this together, you question whether the fire is even happening.
No, I question whether or not the governor has the right to impose the law past the 30 days that our law suggests. That's what I'm questioning. That's the purpose of this lawsuit, to force.
But you also question whether or not the science and the models were true in predicting the number of deaths and increase.
The numbers that we were given, much as they didn't happen. So, and even not even close to happen. So,
do you believe that the governor's actions had that effect? That the governor's actions reduced the number of fatalities?
I believe that so yes, I do not argue with the 30 days of what we did and what we learned from that.
Representative Bailey, an interesting discussion. We look forward to covering and following this lawsuit and the debate about executive power as it proceeds. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Have a good day.
All right, we're back in just a moment.
It just comes naturally, doesn't it? Putting aside money for a car, a house, college, or an unexpected rainy day. Now imagine this times more than 325,000. That's SEFCU members, saving and borrowing, sharing. It's people helping people, each person benefiting from the next, growing together. SEFCU, not a bank, better.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Hi, I'm Brad.
And I'm John with Kramer Siding and Window Company.
If you need new windows, right now we're having our biggest sale of the year.
Buy one, get one 50% off, and we'll honor that on as many windows as you need.
Or if siding, entry doors, or patio doors are your thing, call now and receive 25% off our entire lineup.
So call us today for your free consultation. And remember, at Kramer,
we don't just do a little of everything, we do a lot of everything.
At Robinson Chiropractic, our mission is to glorify God by serving our communities through chiropractic wellness care to achieve maximum capacity for natural healing. 192 people die every day from the opioid epidemic, and chiropractic has natural answers to pain and your health concerns to choose natural first. We have a team of 8 doctors, 3 locations in Danville, Westville, Hoopeston. Visit us at robchiro.com.
For over 80 years, Nissan has been with you through thick and thin. And now is no different. We're offering payment options for current owners. Our service departments are here to help. And now we're offering more help. No payments for 3 months, plus we'll cover your payments for up to 2 additional months. Or get 0% financing for up to 84 months on 13 models. This is help when you need it.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
We're joined now remotely by State Senator Steve McClure, who joins us from his home office before being elected to the State Senate, a Sangamon County prosecutor who prosecuted violent acts against children as part of his purview there. Senator, good to have you with us. I know you've been critical of this action in a letter writing to the governor demanding to know why 7, but specifically 2 of these 7 convicted murderers were released at this time. Make your case. Why? I don't think I saw anything in your letter that disputes the governor has this right, has this authority to make this decision.
He has the right to commute sentences. However, when you make a big issue of Governor Blagojevich getting just 6 years off of his sentence for a nonviolent offense, and then say that murderers of children should get 50 years off their sentence or 20 years off of their sentence, to me, I think the people of Illinois deserve an explanation.
The Chicago Tribune reported that Alma Durr in 1996, a mother, was convicted of murdering her nearly 2-year-old son. That was one of the cases that you highlighted in your letter. Obviously a heinous crime there, and you pointed out that the governor did not absolve her or did not pardon her of that act. And we can presume doesn't think that she was innocent of the charges.
It's even worse than that, because less than a year ago we had a child who was murdered who was being looked after by DCFS, and the governor made a big deal about that and said we have to protect our kids. Well, Alma Durr's child was 21 months old, and he was in the custody of grandma. Mom was not allowed to have custody of the child or unsupervised contact with the child. She went into his, while he was sleeping, took a gun, point blank, and shot him in the head. He suffered for 2 hours, moaning, and before he passed away. Another case in Edwardsville, the guy killed a 5-month-old. He was abused from head to toe, covered in bruises, and DCFS had gone over to check on the child, and the dad, who ended up being the murderer, told them he's sleeping, he can't be bothered. Well, the child was dying, and over the next hour the child passed away. Terrible pain the child was in. I don't understand why you're going to take a 40-year sentence and say that's too harsh for someone like that. By the way, Mark, usually these types of cases where you're dealing with child murderers, it's not, the question for the governor is not, well, should they, get 40 years or 60 years or life or this lesser sentence. It's typically, well, this is a death penalty case. The question is are you going to commute this death penalty sentence to life in prison? Instead, he's putting these people back on the streets at a time when all of our attention and all the media's attention is on COVID-19. And
of course, Illinois, just so our viewers understand, of course, Illinois does not have a death penalty in Illinois, but what you're saying is that the seriousness of these crimes did not warrant, in your view, what the governor's legal authority, how he used his legal authority. You disagree with his discretion, essentially. But does that at all change, in your view, when the governor is also handling, as you just alluded to, this public health crisis, because we've seen so many outbreaks in these prisons, and the governor said, well, okay, look, we've already done a good job over the last 10 years or so at releasing a lot of the mass incarcerated population. We've reduced the prison population drastically by 15–20% or so. Now he's saying, hey, we've got to take anybody who's at the end of their sentence or anyone who's at the end of their life. Maybe the governor said some of these folks are on death's door, maybe with a cancer diagnosis or some other factor that weighed on his mind. Now there's this coronavirus threat. Inmates are increasingly at risk. Do you take that into account when you're writing this letter and when you're criticizing the governor?
Well, the first case is Alma Durr is 50 years old. She doesn't come in those at-risk categories. The other case that I just mentioned, the man who beat to death a 5-month-old child, is also not at the at-risk category. I think Alma Durr's prison, there were no infected inmates at the time that the letter was written. And the same, I think maybe one was infected at the case of the other murderer. And many of these cases are not meeting those criteria. So the question is why are you doing these commutations, particularly, Mark, when you're telling businesses that it's unsafe for you to have customers, you have to keep your doors closed. Why on earth are you going to open up the doors of prisons for someone who beat to death a 5-month-old child? It doesn't make any sense, Mark.
All right, very interesting. Senator Steve McClure joining us from his home office Thanks for logging on, and stay safe, stay well.
I will. Thank you, Mark. You stay safe as well.
Take care. All right, we're back in just a moment.
Here's some great news. One stop for all car and truck repairs, plus a great tire selection. Tires Plus is tires plus routine auto maintenance, plus electrical work, plus brake service, plus air conditioning repairs, plus check engine light diagnosis, plus tire rotation. The Plus is in everything they do, and they'll match any locally advertised prices. There's so much plus, we ran out of time to tell you about the great selection of tires. Tires Plus and all Tires Plus Auto Care. They fix everything.
A quilting bee carries over 6,000 bolts of fabric. You're guaranteed to find whatever it is you're looking for. With a great selection of books, patterns, and kits, you'll have everything you need from start to finish. A Quilting Bee, 406 East Main Street in Mahomet.
At Dick Van Dyke Appliance World in Champaign, we'll beat any competitor's deal. We'll beat any competitor's deal on refrigerators and freezers, and washers and dryers, ranges, microwaves, and dishwashers. I guarantee the best deal on your next appliance purchase.
Justin's trying to decide to get this GE French door refrigerator from Dick Van Dyke or the big department store. Dick Van Dyke has fast repair service.
They don't.
A free 10-year protection plan.
They don't.
After delivery and warranty, we'll save him $102. He's buying from Dick Van Dyke Appliance World.
You and your pet have a lifetime of incredible memories. You absolutely can't imagine life without them. But when the time comes, you'll want to preserve the memory of everything they brought to you. Pause and Remember offers pet cremation as an affordable, wonderful, and loving option to remember your pet. They offer many unique items to memorialize, so you decide how you want to pay tribute to and celebrate your pet's life. You have a choice, so request Pause and Remember to your veterinarian or call our office directly. Pause and Remember in Champaign.
Sloan Implement knows there are challenges ahead. As a family-run business since 1931, we are farmers at heart, and we are in this with you. We've taken steps to support your health during this time. We want you to know we're here like we've always been to help our farmers, agricultural retailers, and our lawn and garden customers through parts pickup, online and phone ordering, outdoor equipment viewings, equipment demos, and more. Sloan Implement, a family-run business since 1931.
It's the Stellar Awards Music of Hope Special. Classic performances from Mary Mary, Yolanda Adams, Donnie McClurkin, Hezekiah Walker, and more. Hosted by Kirk Franklin. Prepare to be uplifted.
Sunday, May 10th at 11:30 on WCIA3. You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
And the newly minted director of the Department of Agriculture in Illinois, Jerry Costello, joins us now. You spent just about a year, just shy of a year, at the Department of Natural Resources. And that's the agency now that Governor Pritzker has tasked with reopening these state parks in phases as Illinois starts to slowly come out from under the shadow of the coronavirus. What exactly do these state parks mean to people? And can you give us any insight as to what that might look like or what that might mean to folks as they get to start going back outdoors safely?
I think being outside, being in some of the state parks, which are some of the most beautiful places in the state of Illinois, it's healthy for people. And I was very glad to see that the governor is looking at doing this and moving forward, opening some of the state parks and possibly expanding that if people do, in fact, adhere to social distancing. I think it's healthy for people to get out in the outdoors. And most people that are like me, an outdoorsman or outdoors person, probably look very much forward to that.
And now you're heading up the Department of Agriculture. And what an interesting, wild ride it has been for Illinois' farmers. Last year with flooding and all the complications that brought about with the planting season. This year, a pandemic. How exactly, are there any ways that this pandemic, we heard Governor Pritzker say that now essential businesses include garden centers and nurseries. Up until this point, the pandemic might not have hit the planting season as hard, but we're staring down the barrel at this whole planting season and all this. How exactly is this pandemic, the coronavirus, impacting Illinois farmers right now?
You know, Mark, so I can answer that question from a number of different fronts. Number one, I would tell you from a planting aspect, farmers have been planting at what I would call a feverish pace. To your point, last year we went through an extremely wet season, a lot of flooding, knock on wood, that's not something that we're experiencing to nearly that degree. So, in talking to the Soybean Association, the corn growers, and literally I just talked to them Wednesday, and farmers are out in the fields, they're planting everything they can as fastly as they can. That being said, if you look at just the food supply chain, obviously from farm to fork, it's something that we at the Department of Agriculture are involved in trying to make sure that it's not impacted. And at the end of the day, when people go to the grocery stores, obviously, they're able to receive product and that the supply chain isn't interrupted.
We've got the end of May, then there's June and July. In the month of August, the Illinois State Fair is right now on the calendar. As of today, is it still on?
I would tell you as of today, yes, it is. Look, at the end of the day, the number one thing that we, the governor's administration as a whole, is concerned about is the safety and security of the citizens of Illinois. So at the Department of Agriculture, we'll be working very closely with the Department of Public Health in monitoring things as we go forward. But as of today, yes, it is. Obviously, August is a long way off from right now.
A little bit of optimism, perhaps some news you've broken. Of course, everything's subject to change, but right now the State Fair is still on. That's something that might provide a little hope and optimism on the horizon here.
Absolutely, Mark, and people need something to look forward to in these days.
All right, thanks so much. We're back in a moment.
I know how overwhelming buying blinds for one room, 2 rooms, or even a whole house can be. I kept driving down the road and I kept seeing a billboard, budget blinds. I need to call them, and I finally got around to it. And I don't know why I waited so long, because it was honestly the easiest part of building the house was working with Tom and Debbie. They had one day where they came in and measured the rooms and showed me all the different products they had, and then another day of installing. I don't know why I waited so long to do it.
Budget Blinds, a style and service for every budget.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
At Robinson Chiropractic, our mission is to glorify God by serving our communities through chiropractic wellness care to achieve maximum capacity for natural healing. 192 people die every day from the opioid epidemic, and chiropractic has natural answers to pain and your health concerns to choose natural first. We have a team of 8 doctors, 3 locations in Danville, Westville, Hoopeston. Visit us at robchiro.com.
There may be a lot of reasons you need to call a roofing company, but you don't always need a new roof. Hi, I'm Cord Schroeder, owner of Bash Pepper Roofing. Our specialty is maximizing your roofing investment. Whether it's a leak that needs fixed to get a few more years out of your current roof, or it's time for a new one, we'll give you an honest opinion on the best options. As a locally owned business, we've proudly served East Central Illinois for the past 100 years. Bash Pepper Roofing, large or small, we cover them all.
Our national forests belong to all of us. Now they need us to help replant them. Visit arborday.org. See how you can help.
That does it for us this week from the Illinois State Capitol. Remember, you can catch all of our full extended interviews up online. We hope to see you right back here at the same time next Sunday. For Capitol Connection, I'm Mark Maxwell. Stay connected to the Capitol all week. Follow us on Twitter at CapConnectIL or watch reports from our Capitol team on WCIA 3. You can also find us on Facebook or WCIA.com.